It's time for Stars on Sports,
a podcast radio show dedicated to sharing stories about our athletic program at Lansing Community College.
LCC Athletics has a strong tradition.
23 national championship wins.
Over 170 All-Americans.
19 MCCAA All-Sports trophies.
Stars on Sports will introduce you to individuals that have contributed to our program's success and give you the backstory on what it takes to develop it.
We'll also dive into and break down the topics and issues facing athletic departments across the nation and right here at LCC.
This is Stars on Sports. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Stars on Sports. I'm joined by our Assistant Athletic Director, Stephen Cutter, and our producer, Dedalian Lowry. And gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about, I don't even like to use the word, but failure, because in our world, and even in my office, it's sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. So, it seems like our office uses the word learn more than we do failure, but failure is a big part of our job and a big part of life. And it has a negative connotation for many people, and it leads them down paths of, we'll even talk about risk taking, because I think that's where we started one of our previous podcasts, how we just touched on failure and even as a motivation in sports. But, and how often it happens and how much is it focused on. So what do you think when you think of the word failure? Is it positive, negative? What do you think?
I think that it really determines how much frequency you have for how impactful it can be. But I think in the sports world, you typically hear things like failure is feedback.
Yeah, I'd say I typically will try to approach failure with a learning thing, but it's hard not to get lost in that sometimes. So
that's kind of where the frequency comes in.
I think
if you're
that
getting
is
a lot of it, it's super challenging.
And I there's two quotes that have come out in public recently that I think really hit on the word failure, and one was by Michael Jordan and one was by Roger Federer, who are two of the best in their sport all time. And I don't have it in front of me, but Michael Jordan talks about how many game-winning shots he missed, how many free throws he missed, how many games he lost. And in the end, though, we remember him for the game winners he hit, the number of points he did score. And the same with Roger Federer had even a better one about, he only won like 50% of his points, but he was still one of the best all time. And the other example that comes up a lot, I think I listened to one of your podcasts with one of your student athletes who talks about, 3 out of 10, the Hall of Fame career in baseball, hitting the ball 3 out of 10 times. So you failed 7 times out of that. And again, I'm a math genius here for figuring that out quickly for you guys. But
the difference is, though, sometimes when you're looking at the professional athletes, is they keep going, they keep playing. And because they're providing action, you can see that they do have some successes beyond just the failures, where maybe not in the professional world. A lot of times you experience failure, it becomes a stopping point, a fork in the road, and sometimes that's a U-turn, and you don't keep going. But in sports, with the professional side, they do keep going, and so they may miss shots, they may strike out, they may fumble the ball, but they get another one, and they may score a touchdown. And that's the kind of the difference between the sports and the real world, because they keep providing the action, where oftentimes when we experience failure, it becomes pretty detrimental, and we don't want any more of that.
Well, especially back to your point of frequency, and if you get in a slump, or if you fail too many times, you could lose your job or lose your position, and that even can impact your performance playing tight or thinking about that. And I know in your program you do a lot of visualization of successful things happening, and I think that's becoming a trained attribute of more programs because of the importance.
But you're not only trying to visualize successful things happening. You're trying to put yourself in situations where they're going to be tense and they're going to be some you're experiencing failure, because if you're just visualizing sunny and 75 all the time and it's not, then you're like, well, why isn't it sunny and 75 right now? I don't know what's wrong. What am I doing wrong? You have to put yourself in situations of experiencing the other side of the coin.
And we talked about that before, about trying to practice those situations, and it can be hard to duplicate. But I want to go back to your point of one of the best quotes I've heard was, it's hard to beat someone that doesn't give up. And when you really think about that, if they, in sports, we have innings or score clocks, and we've seen teams that just ran out of time that were, catching up to the team. But to your point about pro athletes just keep on going, even we've seen where that can overcome talent is by doing it over to keep going at it. And I think that's so important. And I know you've done podcasts on perseverance before, but I think it's even more important in failure, because when you experience failure in something, it can change your mindset, as we talked about at the beginning. But one of my favorite cartoons is like a guy digging a tunnel, and it's a long tunnel, and he quits. And if you pull back, he's like 2 feet away from getting through to the other side. And how many people quit when they're that close to success because they've experienced their share of failure? And I think that's true in a lot of teams and individuals in sport participation, that the frequency of failure could prevent them from continuing in how close they are to success.
Well, I hate to be the pessimist in the group, but at the same time, you've got the other side of the coin. What if the guy keeps trying to dig, but doesn't seem to ever get to the end? Which is some stuff that I've dealt with in my life, where I'm like, I know I'm going to get there, but I just don't. But in that, we got Thomas Edison's quote, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work."
Love it.
So I guess if you look at it from that viewpoint, there's some success in knowing what not to do.
I use an example, like when we have our share of rain in the spring in baseball and softball at LCC, and we use diamond dried or some drying agent to put on our field. And I always joke, like, Turfus. And what a plug for them. Thank you. Sponsored today by. But anyway, we have it in our budget, but it can be an expensive game if you use a lot of Turfus to spread on the field. And at some time, to your point of that digging, you almost put too much on and it might not work, but you're past the point of, well, we've already put too much on. Well, we have to keep going. And the key is, I think the key to success is knowing when or when not to stop. And that's, probably earlier in that decision, but, we talk about stop, go, continue in our office, and choosing your battles, because going too far into something and wasting that, like, Brian Kane said before, if you're hitting the ball 100 miles to the left, but the hole's to the right, you're not going to be successful no matter how far you hit it. That knowing when to stop, or knowing when to accept failure in either pivot directions or change sports is a key factor in being successful too. So
that's true.
I agree. Perseverance is huge, but you're right. If you're digging a hole the wrong way and you keep going, you're never going to get there.
I mean, I'm trying to think of some personal projects that I've done that, but I know I've experienced that, where it just does not seem like I'm going to get to the end of that project, whatever it is.
My wife would give you a number of them for me.
Still working on the gutters then, huh?
I got a temporary solution for the winter. My wife helped me, and we did a nice job of patching that. She had some good ideas. We don't always work well together and trying to solve it, but we did get that one accomplished. So good example. Well, now we're hitting on Laddick's failures. You start with yours, but you go right to mine. You couldn't think of any of yours, but you thought one of mine just like that. You want to talk parking today too?
I'm a producer. I'm supposed to throw it over to you.
Thanks. Well done. Touche.
Yeah. How is the parking going? Better?
A lot better, but frankly, the last week I've struggled. I don't know if my depth perception's getting bad, but I've been mad at my parking the last week. But up until then, I've been doing pretty good, and I have a wider car now even. So So it's very important to me. But
There you go.
keep working on it. But I failed in many ways in parking and home improvement projects that I'm not very handy at. And even at LCC, I mean, we have a strong tradition of being successful here, and I think we focus a lot on those. But when you look back, I mean, our teams haven't gone undefeated, or they haven't necessarily won certain championship, but we still look back as having successful seasons. I mean, in the end, if you're going to, and we've talked about the scoreboard before, one team gets that success on that last game compared to the other hundreds of teams that are participating in that sport. Even when you go to a national tournament, there could be 8 to 20 teams there, only one's going to win it. So is it a failure for some of the other ones? And I didn't have this on my notes today, but there's been some good talk about this in life. The Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis, had some, they won a championship a couple years ago and haven't really gotten real close again. And so they keep asking him about failure. And I think he's had some good answers about that hasn't defined us, that, we are, we didn't win it all this year. And then the Tennessee baseball coach,
Tony Vitello,
had a great, I have it somewhere saved on a picture about, when you look at just one game, it could be a failure, but there could be a lot of wins within that game. When you look at a national championship, that's one game in a season, but you still could have a lot of wins in that season. So there's even, as we talk about microscopic views or telescopic views on your season, of everyone focuses on that one at the end, even the last play of a game, we focus on that, but there could have been a lot of good things that happened during that game that were successful, but we get so focused on maybe one attribute where there were a lot of other successes in that story. One kid could have had a great game that game, which he alluded to, like someone stepped up even though we lost. So it's all perspective too. And in sports, we focus on the statistics of win losses or points, or there's other statistics we could look at being successful, like our women's basketball coach, who's had a nice successful run, has really worked on defensive stats, how we've been top 5 in defensive stats in the country, especially block shots over the last year. And she emphasizes that one of the this will be another podcast down the line, because this is my kind of the quote that's hit me over the last week, and I think I talked to you about it, that what is praised is repeated. And back to when you win or do something good, that kind of fits into that phrase, that you'll continue to do that, where if you fail, back to Thomas Edison, that's a way not to do it,
right?
And back to learning from it. But for some reason, failure has such a negative connotation that it can be very impactful on your performance.
Well, ultimately, we just get kind of stuck in those situations where we dwell on the failures, and I would imagine that's got to happen at the plates. Somebody who's just in a slump, is that what they call it?
Yeah, that's what they call it, and
where they get that negative mind process in their brain, and so that as a result, they just continue to fail when they get up to that step up to the plate.
And most of the time, it's not that they've forgotten how to hit. It's they've forgotten what success looks like.
Yeah.
And there are two other things I'd like to hit on. That is, one, the other person is having success. Like when you think of like the batter strikes out, well, the pitcher struck him out, so that is success for possibly somebody else. And the other is how you handle it, which we've talked a lot about. Is I think failure gets a lot of negative connotation in sports because people come up with excuses when they fail, instead of switching it and figuring out how to move forward and making it a positive situation and owning up to it. Because, that's why I don't always use a scoreboard, because I want to be the best team, but sometimes that team could be better than us. And if we play our best, that still can be something we build on.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about my golf game, as always, anytime we get into these conversations.
I'm glad you're all parking and
as I think about it, I can definitely tell you, the more I focus on some of those bad shots, more of those bad shots occur.
Yeah.
So
I think golf's a great example of that, like, because they're in baseball, the swing is so intricate that usually when you don't think about it, you have a nice motion where thinking about going back slow, going back straight, keeping my arms straight. And I think that makes you lose focus and on the things that will help you be successful. And I'm sure you do a lot of that in baseball.
Overanalyzing the situation.
We just talk about keeping things simple. If you're gonna run a race against somebody else and they say go and you take off, you're not gonna be thinking about what your right arm's doing or what your left leg's doing or how hard your feet are going into the ground. You're just running. And I think a lot of what you're saying comes down to effort and action. And if you can put in extreme amounts of effort and action, and what teams are typically looking for is there's two words, there's conditional and unconditional. And what you will see from we'll say middle of the road teams is they'll put in conditional effort or conditional actions, and those conditional things will be based upon what the scoreboard says. Those conditional things would be based upon maybe if they're a starter or if they're a second string or third string. And the great ones put in unconditional effort, and it doesn't have to do with those extrinsic things. It's an intrinsic thing. And so you'll see the great teams put in a lot of unconditional effort.
Done, Mr. Cutter. Well done, because that leads me to a couple of things. That preparation and planning can help with that failure. And I like the word intentional, as I've shared with you, intentional practice. And I saw it firsthand in our cross country team this fall at the national championship. Some teams did start out fast to try and get that lead, and we tracked our team, and they were third at the first mile or first kilometer, second in the middle of the race, and first toward the end, and then finished first. And they had a plan, and they practiced it and they worked it, and that led to probably less failure than being in a tense situation and going out and letting the emotion catch you and go out and run fast. Another example, so preparation, I think, is a big part of that. I was going to send this to you last night, but Dan Campbell, who at some time we're going to talk about on this podcast, which we have already, he's the Detroit Lions head football coach, and he really intrigues me with his style, and I embrace it, but I just want to know, if it works or doesn't work. Well, it has worked, but to the highest level. But he came out last night and the thing is that, talking about quit making excuses for all the injuries they have. He talked about how success can lead to complacency, which leads to failure. And these injuries are them getting punched in the mouth, which is a podcast that we have used before. And you know what? Suck it up. I mean, persevere. We know what we're dealing with. And it's the best thing that happened to us, he said, that was losing. Because now we'll go back to, and he compared it to eating filet mignons to eating bread, that they started with bread and now they've experienced filet mignons and now they're back to bread, and this will make them hopefully work harder. But failure can do that. Some coaches, when you ride a long winning streak into the postseason, some want to kind of lose right before that to maybe refocus. I don't ever want to lose, but the intent is that because of winning a lot can lead to complacency, or that experienced failure can help you refocus.
Yes, complacency is a large thing in teams, and it's a word I despise.
I saw you over there.
But
cringy.
It comes down to stay humble, stay hungry.
Yeah. And again, even staying humble and hungry, you could still fail. But back to one of our premises of this podcast is how you respond to failure, and that is something we in our athletic department at LCC have tried to use it as a learning thing instead of as a result thing. And even though we've had our share of success, and we look back and even in our byline, we talk about all our successes, not our failures, but usually a lot of failure goes into being successful.
Yeah.
So, all right, I think that's a little shorter, but a good place to end. So as we record this, it's the holiday time. And so I have kind of two questions for you. And the first question is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Bruce Willis?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna say no. I've actually had this discussion before. Every time I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. It just takes place at Christmas. That's it. That's just me. That's the way I feel about it.
I've heard a lot of discussion lately on it. I've gone back and forth, and most recently, I am considering it a Christmas movie because it does take place at Christmas, and they have. It's not centered around Christmas, is what some of the people that premise saying it's not a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I mean, compared to Elf, that is not anywhere near a Christmas movie. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
You know, I've watched it probably twice in the last couple of weeks. I love the movie.
It's a great movie.
It is a great movie. And it, again, it has a lot of the holiday party at the place of work. Not that we're.
But if I was to put out a bunch of DVDs that I say are Christmas movies and Die Hard's in that, I'm not feeling it. You know, it doesn't.
I get it.
Miracle on 34th Street, Die Hard.
You put it like that. Coach Cut, you got any thoughts on that?
I think Dedalian's contagious proximity is extremely strong, so I'm gonna follow him and say no shot.
No shot. Okay. All right. Well, I'm used to being on the short end of this. So then let's go into what is your favorite Christmas movie?
Oh, that is a good question. I have a couple, actually. Well, a Grinch is always going to be my favorite, and I'm talking about the classic cartoon version. But other than that,
not the Jim Carroll version.
I am a huge fan of Christmas Carol, so you could pick almost any version of that, but I'm always still going to be the Bill Murray Scrooged version is going to always be my favorite go-to.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coach Gut, you got anything to add to that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
That is a big one.
Yep.
On another podcast, that was huge. That's not one of mine, but okay, good.
No, that'd be in my top three easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any others?
I don't think so.
And it's got one of my favorite holiday tunes in it too. So the one by Mavis Staple, I think that's who does it. It's the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, just like Christmas Vacation is the name of the tune.
Okay, I gotta look at it because we have a game this Saturday, so I'm trying to put a holiday playlist together to play in between breaks. So I will have to look that up.
What about you?
It's hard because you go back to like the older traditional ones, like Miracle on 34th Street's one of my favorites for some reason. When you have kids, it kind of switches perspective. Like I think some of my kids love Elf, as you mentioned, and it is a good movie. Some love Polar Express. This year I seem to see Christmas with the Cranks a little bit, which I like Tim Allen. I like the Santa Claus. So I love Christmas movies, actually. So it would be hard for me. The one we didn't mention that seems to be on a lot of people's list is The Christmas Story, but that's not one that our family has really rallied around. It would probably be Elf and Polar Express.
It's a Wonderful Life. I was trying to think of the other classic.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why, but my brain would not even go there. I was like,
that's a good one.
I could think of George Bailey, but I could not think of the movie. Yeah, that's a great movie.
It is, and it's a great time of year. Hopefully, people are happy and giving, and a lot to be thankful for. As we talk about words, gratitude is a big one in our office. So, don't know when this podcast will come out, but we have a lot to be thankful for, and happy holidays to everyone. Yeah. Until then, go Stars. Stars on Sports is recorded live at the WLNZ studios. Engineering and production assistance are provided by Dadalian Lowry. You can listen to this episode and other episodes of Stars on Sports on demand at lccconnect.org. To find more information about our athletic program, visit lccstars.com. Thanks for listening. Go Stars!